So welcome to this afternoon's presentations sessions. We're just starting just a shade ahead of 2 o'clock to be able to maximise the time in these sessions. So it's my great pleasure to chair this first session in this room and a special pleasure to open today with Te Maire Tau, who's, I can't remember when you haven't been part of my historical cosmos, Te Maire, but there probably was a time, but it was so long ago, it's not there. And always a valuable, provocative, enriching presence in that world. So, Te Maire, welcome to the session and to talking about resources, regulation and rangatiratanga, I think is your topic for this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Oh, tēnā rā koutou, and thank you very much for the introduction, Charlotte. Look, I think where we're heading to, so there'll be pauses during this discussion. I've got 10 minutes exactly. I'm going to do this properly, Charlotte, and time myself, because I don't want to take up time. So I think the challenge that we are facing at the moment for Māori is evident in the slide here. And I just want to open this up because if you know anything of us, over the last 50 years, really in the last 30, when we started settling our claim, Maire Tau, who started our settlement negotiations in 1991, and we finished in 98, and really there's been settlements going on ever since. But there's been an interesting point that despite all of the settlements, despite findings in the judicial system, the advances made through legislation, where no one has gone is towards the idea of defining what exactly rangatiratanga is. And to some extent, it still lies with Donna Awatere when she wrote, it was a superb book, Māori Sovereignty. But if you read Donna Awatere, what she said at the end was that if we want rangatiratanga, we have to dream it. And it was about then I stopped reading it because I thought what Donna really became was a secular religious prophet because there was no body towards it. And this is really where we still are today because despite everything, the changes that have happened, the demographics, we haven't gone to the place of what rangatiratanga means today in modern New Zealand. And I think that's the challenge for us to do it responsibly because if we don't, what will happen is everyone will define the term like co-governance, partnership, those things. So it's really critical and it's an important part for us to do this. So I'm going to start with an idea that Justice Joe Williams has been talking about for a while, and I suspect he's partially right. It's not as if we don't have the ingredients or the requirements and the measures within our own settlements to establish what we mean by rangatiratanga within New Zealand. And it was there as early as the country was founded. It's really there in Ned Fletcher's book. I went back to my thesis in 1992 sometime, pulled out this quotation. Henry Sewell was saying the same thing when he was after he became Premier. And he says this, there's no theoretical or practical difficulty in the maintenance under the same sovereign of various codes of law for the government of different races within, really he's saying the British Empire. And he goes through examples where the Crown sovereign is there, but different tribal groups have their own sense of government there as well. It's certainly there in the 1858 Native District Regulations Act, it should read. And William Fox, the Premier, says here, the Rūninga should be empowered to make bylaws in all matters which concern those who live within its jurisdiction. The interesting thing about this Act, the Regulations Act, it's wrongly named there, is that it's quite clear the regulatory authority of the Rūninga established would supersede that of the provincial government. And we can come up to the modern period where there was the Te Wehi decision where everyone breathed a sigh of relief at home because we could go out home and get power on our own terms without ending up in jail. So the Te Wehi decision in '86 was quite a big act from home where tikanga or custom had a basis within the Fisheries Act. 1998, this is quite an interesting part of our settlement. It's explicit in our settlement where the Crown says it recognises Ngāi Tahu as the tangata whenua of and as holding rangatiratanga within the takiwā of Ngāi Tahu whānui. It's a very clear sentence. And the Crown can't go any further than that because it's not the Crown's role to determine what our rangatiratanga is. We had all these debates back in the 90s, and it's in legislation. So in fact, the tribe does have the right of rangatiratanga clearly there. And in fact, the Crown says in the deed of settlement that the settlement does not diminish or undermine any rights, including those of the Treaty of Waitangi, including rangatiratanga rights. So I think largely there's all of these statements coming through the judicial system at the moment. I'm not going to go on that because they're there. They're simply laying on the ground. So the question is, we have these things, but we've never gone to being clear about what our rangatiratanga is. And I think the question now, and I'm really quite tired of essays about rangatiratanga from our students at an undergraduate level, what we need to do, I think, is the question is not what it is, but how we implement it. And I think it's simply a matter of this. Implementing Ngāi Tahu rangatiratanga, some assembly required. I think the parts there, it just has to be engineered to do it. And this is simply the position that I think you'll find the tribe in and where we head to next in authority. The reason why I came to this and we came to this position is you may remember over the last decade, there has been talk about the Māori economy. But the more I look at this Māori economy, we don't have an economy. It's an adjunct of the larger power economy that we have today. The power culture we have today determines our economy. If you really look at it, we're a subset of the larger economy. It's not Māori. There are discrete areas where our economy plays out, but in the end, we don't have a reserve bank. There is the nation state. They regulate, they control, right down to fundamental issues for Māori all around. You know, the most important capital asset is a house for Māori. But the regulatory authority over Māori land, the consenting issues, the whole regulatory authority belongs to someone else. So we've been working over this for the last 2 decades, really. What we've come to understand, when we talk about regulatory authority within the tribe, it means 3 things, and I'm going to finish on these 3 points before we go to questions. If the tribe and other iwi are going to head towards rangatiratanga, we have to take it out of the forest like a pot of gold and make sure it doesn't turn into a pot of ash. So in that, we think regulatory authority means 3 things. First, we think rangatiratanga means 3 things. The first is Māori must have regulatory authority over their resources. If you understand Māori land, if you go to any reserve land, it's quite clear there's a lot of land there. Māori have no regulatory authority over it. The Māori Land Court, local government, everyone does, which is really why it's dead capital. You go to Māori land, it's dead capital because no one controls it. The second one is if we're going to have rangatiratanga in our own government, form of government, and I'll be clear, the tribe isn't concerned about national sovereignty. It's where the tribe fits in terms of creating its own government. The second ingredient is fiscal authority, jurisdiction. Who's controlling the buck? And it's an important question. We did a study on infrastructure within Christchurch. I should have put up the slides, but I'm a historian, I don't want to deal with data. But the contribution Ngāi Tahu has made to the infrastructure in Christchurch after the earthquake is substantial. 8 subdivisions in the city. We built the infrastructure. Then we pay the financial contributions. And that's a significant input into the city. But if you go to where those rates go, they don't go to the reserves. You go out to the reservations, we still lack sewerage, water infrastructure, the whole thing. So if Māori are going to have their own form of government. They need to control the flow of cash, right through from the multipliers throughout their own economy. The final thing, and it's the most difficult one for tribal members to get their head around, but we're heading there, is Crown title. The tribe needs its own title over its own land. Because at the end, if the land remains under Crown title, you know where the sovereignty lies. Which is why the Tūhoe settlement really is quite interesting. Crown title was removed up there. The implications of that, I don't think are clear, but it's really quite interesting because if you understand New Zealand history, Crown sovereignty increased through purchase and the Rebellion Act. Where it didn't have sovereignty were the areas where it didn't have the right of purchase or through the Rebellion Act. So I think one of the issues that the tribe will need to get its head around is how we convert our own lands into tribal title, and I'll just raise this in the last 15 seconds, how we extinguish Crown title. End. Charlotte, do I ask questions now?
Perfect timing, Maire. So yes, there's a couple of minutes of questions, and those of you who do need or wish to change rooms, this is the moment to also do that. So, a couple of minutes of questions.
How do you extinguish Crown title?
Well, I won't give my view, but I think it's really quite simple. The same way that the Crown believes it extinguished tribal title. I think there's a whole bunch of assumptions made in this. And I really do think if the tribe simply says as part of our rangatiratanga, it now sits in our title, the mechanisms, which is why I think the fundamental question is not what, it's how. I think the answer to how, you'll be surprised how much it's found in the Westminster parliamentary system. Lots of mechanisms there. Okay. Right. Kia ora, everyone. Thank you.